I often get asked on the channel, why do you always use a Tyrannus in your videos? And the reason is because I find it the most versatile when it comes to bind and flies and also FPV simulators. Its USB port on the back doubles up as a USB game controller, and it accepts different modules in the back, allowing for DSM-2, DSM-X or long-range UHF, whatever you want really. It just slots into the back. But a lot of people rightly point out that it's expensive and I should feature more affordable gear, so that's what I'm going to do today. This is the Flysky i6X, and on face value it looks identical to the Flysky i6, which is another cheap model that Flysky make. Now, the i6 is a 6-channel transmitter, hence the name, but with 4 switches and 2 dials. So on the original i6, you have the option to use any 2 of these extra switches or dials, as well as the controls for the model, making up for the 6 channels. And it's a very popular transmitter. A lot of the RTF models come with it, and therefore it's become a standard itself. Now, some very clever people realise that by hacking the firmware, you can open up all 10 channels to be used at the same time. So, at hardly any extra cost, that is what the Flysky i6X brings to the table, as well as a versatile receiver called the FS-i6X It's currently sat at about £45, which is a tenner more than the PPM version of the i6. So, if you fancy a bit of tinkering, you can save yourself a bit of money there. However, I got this one because I find the receiver as interesting as the transmitter. As you can see, it looks more like a FreeSky receiver, completely decased. You can see it has 2 detachable antennas and then various ports. The large port is for your PWM output, and you are given the correct cable for that. Underneath is a built-in voltage sensor, so you can connect that directly up to the VBAT of your quadcopter if you wish, and you will then get the voltage telemetry on your main screen of the transmitter. Again, you have a servo connector for that, and I believe it will take up to a 4S. Over onto the other side, we have options for iBus and PPM, and again we are given the corresponding servo connectors. So, what is iBus? Well, it copies the FreeSky S-Bus system, and S-Bus again is copied from Futaba, but there you go. But this is Flysky's own version of it. With iBus, you get 18 available channels, but of course we can only use 10 at the same time anyway with this transmitter. But iBus has a lower latency than PPM and PWM, with latency being the delay between your hands on the sticks and the signal reaching the receiver. iBus has a latency of around 7.5 milliseconds, while PPM and PWM has a latency of around 22 milliseconds. But in practice, our FPV gear has a much higher latency than that, so I can never really tell the difference between the two personally. Many will argue differently, of course, and that is fine. In PPM mode, you get 8 channels, which is all I need for a mini quad, and in PWM mode, you are limited to 6 channels. The manual of this transmitter isn't very good, sadly, and you are also given some really strange spare stickers without the holes for the switches cut out of them, so I'm not sure what they are for, but there you go. You are given a USB cable which attaches to the trainer port at the back. However, unlike the Tyrannus, it does not act as a game controller when plugged into a computer. It is for updating the firmware only. You can, however, use one of these 22-in-1 cables to turn it into a USB controller without any messing about. You just have to plug it into the PC and you are ready to use it with the simulators out there. Now, there's many features of this transmitter, but the majority of them I'm not going to use, so I'm going to set up a model and bind it to the Eachine Wizard that I have here, which I plan to review in another video. The receiver has 2 holes in it for standoffs, so I should be able to fit it nicely inside the model. The Wizard comes with its receiver configuration set up for PPM, so I have had to move the receiver wire to the I02 on the flight controller, which isn't a big deal. The receiver servo wire also comes set up to receive pins on the other end of it, so I have taken a set of pins from a spare flight controller that I have, so the iBus wire and the flight controller wire mate together. I will stick some tape around that too so that they don't come apart from any vibrations. Sadly, the i6X is still requiring 4 AA batteries instead of a LiPo, but I guess it could be modified to fit a small LiPo. But instead I have these rechargeable AA batteries which do work well. In order to set up the i6X for iBus output, I just need to set the output on the transmitter to PPM. Turn the i6X on and then long press the OK button and then press OK again to go into the system menu. If you go into model select, you can see I'm starting on model 1. But if you want to change the model, you have a 20 model memory to select from. Any option is only ever changed with a long press of the cancel button, which I find annoying. You can change the model name as well, but I'm being lazy and leaving it default for this video. It's important to name your models though, so you know which one to select when you want to change models. The model type doesn't really matter, but you can change it to helicopter here by using the up and down keys. You are going to want to navigate down to RX setup and then down to output and select PPM. I've also set the serial RX to iBus. You do that by pressing on the OK button again and then use the up and down buttons to select the correct option. Remember, to save you have to long press the cancel button. If I now press cancel out of that menu, I can go down to the aux switches. You need to make sure that all of the switches are turned on and the channel selection number is set to 10. However, I'm only actually using 6 in total here. Now, if I cancel out of there and go into the setup menu, I can navigate down to the auxiliary channels or aux channels. I just want 2 switches for my mini quad. I want to arm on switch B, which is a 2-position switch, and then the other 3-position switch for my modes. I'm going to use switch C for that. The other 2 switches on this transmitter are 2-position switches, and of course we have the 2 potentiometers as well. So, in the menu I can use the up and down keys to cycle all the switches and dials. For channel 5 I'm selecting switch C, and then I can press the OK button to move down to channel 6, and here I can select switch A for arming. If setting up for a simulator, you might want to assign all of the switches and dials to a channel, and again remember to long press cancel to save the options. Lastly, I'm going to set up my failsafe, and this is something that I don't like about this receiver. It's got 2 buttons on it. One is the bind button and the other says update on it for updating the firmware. Unlike FreeSky, there's no way to manually set the failsafe, which isn't a problem if you have this computer programmable transmitter. However, if you have one of the lower Flysky transmitters without the programmable display, there's no way to set the failsafe currently. So, to set the failsafe here, I need to move over to the functions menu again. I'm scrolling down to RX setup again and selecting failsafe. I need the throttle to be at 0 when the transmitter loses signal with the aircraft. So throttle is channel 3 with the Flysky protocol, so I can scroll down to it and then press OK. You then turn on the failsafe by pressing the up button, and then I can use the stick to set the failsafe value. I want it to throttle to 0 here, so I'm leaving the stick at the bottom. Then I'm going to long press cancel to save it. I also want the quadcopter to disarm when it loses signal, so I need to scroll down to channel 6 and again turn the failsafe on with the up button, then have my switch in the off position and long press cancel to save the setting. You need to long press cancel again out of that menu to save any of the settings, which is annoying, so don't let it catch you out like it has done me many times. Everything is now ready to bind to the receiver, and this is the part that I never like. First, I'm going to turn off the transmitter. Then you have to hold down the bind button on the receiver while powering on the quad. It's always a tricky one to do. Once the receiver is flashing, then I need to hold down the bind button on the transmitter while turning it on. You need to make sure that you've got the right model selected while doing this as well. The i6X should beep and the receiver light will go a solid red. The next thing to do is to go into Betaflight or CleanFlight and set up the serial RX in the Ports tab. In the case of the SP Racing F3, iBus works on the UART3, so I've turned it on here. Then, in the Configuration tab, Serial RX needs to be selected under Receiver as well as iBus in the drop-down menu. Lastly, go over to the Receiver tab to make sure that the channel map is set to AETR, which is the Flysky default. You can check here if anything needs to be reversed in the transmitter's setup menu, but nothing was needed for this particular model. I have set up the receiver inside the model and used some 6mm heat shrink to secure the antennas in place. So what's the range like? Well, the same as with the i6, the manufacturer recommends 300 to 600 meters maximum. However, some individuals have found that it will go out to a few kilometers. Personally, that is not needed for me. Now, I'm not going to fly this model today because the weather is too bad. So let's hook the i6X up to real flight and let's go and have some fun in the simulator. Now, a lot of people won't know this, but I have flown planes a lot more than I have helicopters and of course quadcopters, because quadcopters and multi-rotors are fairly new in general, and I don't get chance to showcase my aeroplane skills enough on the channel, and that is because planes take up a lot of space and I don't have space to store them anymore, and I don't have anywhere to fly one, certainly not a big one like this big petrel. But I do want to do more plane stuff on the channel because it's what I love to do the most, really, and I haven't flown a plane for quite a while. I think I reviewed the Hubsan Spyhawk, the latest one, and that's pretty much all the flying I've been able to do with a plane, but I absolutely love flying planes. I think there's nothing more natural than doing so. Now, this controller is fantastic for a simulator. It is really lightweight, so it's not hard to hold. The gimbals are just fantastic for accurate flying, and it's really easy to set up. You just plug it in the back and away you go. Having a lot of fun with this big petrol plane here. Let's see if we can get and do some hovering with it. This is something that I used to like to do. I used to annoy all the people in my flying club because I've been making a lot of noise, and I've got a smoke switch there as well, and then you could smoke everyone out. It's so much fun. Anyway, what I want to do actually before I close this video is I want to give you a little taster of something that's hopefully going to be coming up on the channel. I think one of these lifts the hatch up. Look at that. Set up all the channels up. It's so much fun. Anyway, let's see if I can find that aircraft that I was talking about. This is the Stingray, and I first saw this on Flight Test a few years ago, and I thought, what a fantastic idea, that's going to catch on and that's going to change everything. Collective pitch at a quadcopter, and that didn't really happen, really. And I think it's because a lot of the maneuvers you learn as a 3D pilot, they don't really translate to FPV because you have a different perspective of the quadcopter when flying line of sight that you can't really get when flying FPV. and of course it does cross over, but I think a lot of the 3D guys stick to doing line of sight 3D, and the FPV guys do FPV. That's not to say you can't do 3D FPV, I've done that in the past, but you can't do the same maneuvers if you don't have the same perspective as you do. Nice tick-tock there. No, I'm not the best at flying 3D. When I got back into this hobby, I bought myself a little collective pitch helicopter just before quadcopters hit the mainstream, really, and I absolutely loved it. And then I got the Hubsan H1070, and that was that. I sort of gave up on it, really. And something that I want to do in the hobby really is master 3D collective pitch, because it's the only thing that I feel that I haven't really given enough time. And I sort of did all I could with planes, really, but this is still new to me, so I want to fly it more. And I'm flying this today because there's something similar to it coming to the channel soon, so I need to up my 3D skills as much as I can. I'm not sure I'd be able to fly it as well as I'm doing here, because I could take a lot of risks when on a simulator, and that is what I love about it. But some of these maneuvers, maybe they could translate to something, I don't know. But anyway, look out for that in the future. And until then, get one of these i6 controllers, and the dongle that I'm going to put in the description there comes with this simulator, and you can use it with your i6X and have a lot of fun like I'm doing here. And it doesn't cost you a fortune when you smack it into the ground. So there you go, that is my review of the Flysky i6X. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll put a link in the description to where to get it from. As always, thanks so much for watching. Please continue to subscribe. Cheers.